Hi everyone, it's William Henry. In my quest to get us all prepared for my IMX presentation, I've got another short presentation I want to share with you today that's called Star Walkers at the Pentagon. And it's going to bring us into what is happening on a day-to-day basis right now in American politics as concerns non-human intelligence, UAP, and the whole phenomena, especially relating it to what we know about the Book of Enoch. So let's jump in. In recent months, Congressperson Ana Paulina Luna from Florida, a Republican member of the U.S. House of Representatives, has unexpectedly brought the ancient Book of Enoch into modern political conversation, especially in discussions about UAPs and non-human intelligence. This is one of the most profound revelations and discussions that is going on in our planet right now. Luna has been active in congressional discussions around UAP disclosure and government transparency for a number of years. She's part of the House Oversight Committee and the bipartisan UAP caucus that formed after whistleblower testimony from such figures as David Grush. She's been an insider in terms of the Congress. She's been spearheading this along with Congressman Tim Burchett and others to bring this knowledge forward. And during discussions surrounding classified briefings, often referred to as SCIF briefings, Luna reportedly referenced the Book of Enoch as a framework some research used when thinking about ancient descriptions of non-human beings. What this is saying is that members of Congress and even within our government are referring to the Book of Enoch as source material for understanding our contemporary interaction with this non-human intelligence. And the point was not that Congress is endorsing a religious text as evidence, but that ancient literature might contain descriptions of encounters with non-human entities that will help us to understand what's going on. Welcome to Ancient Aliens 2026, right? I mean, for over 16 seasons on Ancient Aliens, I've been one of the core presenters that have established exactly this line of thinking, and that if Congress really wants to know about what's going on in the contemporary UAP phenomena, they have got to get a fundamental understanding of the stair steps that we have taken these past several thousand years in understanding this interaction, again, as documented on Ancient Aliens. So let's focus on the Book of Enoch for a moment. It's an ancient Jewish text written roughly 300 BC to 100 current era. The Essenes, Jewish mystics, the tribe out of which Jesus, Mary Magdalene, the other disciples emerged, are believed to be the authors. Probably it was written in Egypt at a place called Bubastis, although it's the copies of the Book of Enoch were actually found at Qumran near Jerusalem. The Book of Enoch was intentionally excluded from the biblical canon just because it's too hot to handle. It's speaking of other layers of reality, human transformation into a higher being. It speaks of the Watchers, beings who descend from heaven, forbidden knowledge given to humanity, hybrid offspring, the Nephilim referred to in the book of Genesis, heavenly journeys through multiple realms. It's an astonishing text. And in it, we learn that these angels descend to earth, they interact with humans, they teach technology and secret knowledge, and humanity is then warned about corruption caused by these beings. And in the books of Enoch, they use this as a justification for why the flood came that decimated humanity, we now believe, around 12,000 years ago. And because of this, this text has become a reference point in modern discussions for ancient encounters with non-human intelligences. I have been referring to the Book of Enoch going back and talking about it, going back to my book, The Secret of Sion, 2010, The Judgment Day Device, 2012, and Lost Secret of the Watchers, which was around 2014. This moment that we are living is culturally significant. We are in a transition moment where we are upgrading our understanding of these non-human intelligences. And because Enoch is the archetypal star walker, the first human to ascend, according to the book of Genesis, he becomes a penultimate figure in our conversation. He becomes a guide for the process that is presently unfolding in our world. In the Book of Enoch, he ascends through multiple heavens. These can be interpreted as multiple layers of the simulation, if you follow the simulation hypothesis. It includes encounters with non-human intelligences. He receives cosmic knowledge. He transforms and returns as the transformed Metatron, which means beyond human. He is a transhuman, in other words. And in other words, this story is fundamentally about human interaction with higher non-human intelligences and human transformation into a light being, capable then of traveling the stars as a star walker. In 3 Enoch, Metatron or Enoch, Metatron is the name of Enoch after he transforms into an angel. This text describes how describes to Rabbi Ishmael how Enoch lived before the great flood. This is affirmed in the book of Genesis, and it is thought in the alternative history scenario to actually be the Atlantean civilization. I'm not going to go so far as to say that Enoch was an Atlantean, but we can characterize him in this category. And it tells then how he was transubstantiated from mortal to angelic form. As told in 2nd Enoch, the Lord said to the archangel Michael, a non-human intelligence, an operator from the throne of God, go to earth and extract Enoch from his earthly clothing and anoint him with my delightful oil and put him in the clothes of my glory. And so Michael did. And just as the Lord had said to him, he appointed Enoch with oil and he clothed me. And the appearance of that oil is greater than the greatest light. Its ointment is like sweet dew, and its fragrance and its rays like the rays of the glistening sun. And after Enoch is anointed by Michael with this oil, he looks at himself and realized he had become like one of the glorious ones, and there was no observable difference. What kind of an oil could the Archangel Michael possess that could anoint a human body and dissolve it into rainbow-colored light, which is the description of the glorious ones, so that now Enoch had transubstantiated or transfigured into an angelic form? They're not talking about this so much in Congress. They need to, because we have an oil problem on our planet right now, and this oil solves all our oil problems if we turn our attention to it. Because the Book of Enoch, at its heart, at its core, clearly and explicitly describes the transformation of Enoch into an angelic form, and he blurs the boundaries between human and angelic existence. This runs directly parallel with what is presently happening with transhumanism, where through technology we are trying to effect exactly this same transformation. So when we're thinking about Enoch, I want you to be thinking about a human, a mortal flesh and blood being who is very much like you and I, hit the books, did the research, learned the lore, somehow called in the Archangel Michael. Michael anoints him with an oil, dissolves his body into rainbow-colored light, so that now Enoch is equal to the angels. Now, I want to just insert here just for a moment that while Congressperson Ana Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett are strolling through the Capitol, the rotunda, on their way to work in the U.S. Congress, they might consider looking up into the rotunda. And if they do, what they are going to see, as I pointed out in my book, Freedom's Gate, is the demonized, the apotheosized George Washington. This is Washington who is in a celestial space, who is transfigured from an ordinary human into a divine being. The fresco is called the apotheosis of George Washington for that reason, and he is portrayed on a rainbow surrounded by 13 maidens with stars on their heads. These are non-human intelligences. This is not an earthly scene. This is Washington in the celestial realms. And I point this out because in certain traditions of Freemasonry, they will tell you that George Washington is Enoch. George Washington is Enoch. Okay? And this possibility that we can transform and transfigure into an angelic type of existence is not only at the core of the Book of Enoch, it really is at the core of the foundation of America as portrayed here in this fresco. Now, when you're looking at that, as You might be thinking, well, wait a minute, why is Washington on a rainbow? Well, the reason is because he's not only Enoch, he's also the American Christ. That imagery is drawn directly from Christian resurrection imagery that also features the Archangel Michael. In this painting by Roger van der Weyden, we see Michael at the base of the painting holding the scales with Jesus up on top on a rainbow. This is because it was widely believed by the Essenes who wrote the Book of Enoch that Jesus was then also demonstrating exactly the same transformation that Enoch had previously undergone in the pre-flood world. The glorious ones that are described in the Book of Enoch are the celestial beings, the non-human intelligence in our contemporary vernacular, the angels of heaven who do obeisance to the Lord. They obey the Lord and who are radiant and shining. So this means that when Enoch removed his earthly clothes and was anointed by Michael, he put on the clothes of glory, the robe. He now looked like and was equal to the angels who love the Lord. More, the transformed or transmuted Enoch no longer needs food or sleep, according to Enoch, the book. His face is incandescent and he becomes omniscient. This is a profound transformation that the Archangel Michael has effected for this human being. And the possibility is held out here, according to these texts that describe this oil, that it will return in an end time scenario and assist in the ascension of the human species. Just imagine if that were the case. I write about this, by the way, in my book, The Psychedelic Christ. I have a whole chapter about this oil that we're describing here. But the key point of Enoch and the Christian tradition around resurrection is to remember that we too are fractals of our Creator. We are Enoch. We are Jesus. We are all these figures who ascended, and it is entirely within the realm of possibility that we too can follow Enoch, Christ, and Christ in their transfiguration. So the story of Enoch represents the prototype of the ascended human, of the transfigured human, or what I refer to as the Star Walker, a human who encounters higher intelligences, non-human intelligences, receives knowledge, undergoes transformation, becomes a bridge between worlds. And Enoch then becomes one of the world's oldest narratives of human evolution into a higher state of being. So with all of that in mind, this backstory, let's now look, as I did, at what happened last summer in August 2025 when Representative Ana Paulina Luna tells Joe Rogan she's seen evidence that UFOs are, quote, interdimensional beings who are referenced in the Bible. I'm going, oh, this should be interesting, okay, because I know a lot about what she's speaking of here, and I can't wait to hear what someone with insider secret knowledge is actually going to say. Representative Ana Paulina Luna, told Joe Rogan that the U.S. government has confirmed the existence of interdimensional beings capable of moving through our time and space, wielding energy technology far beyond human comprehension. And she says she's personally seen evidence proving, quote unquote, spaceships. Okay? In her conversation with Joe Rogan, she says, I guess to break it down into simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, whatever these energy things have, and at that moment, Rogan drops his voice and is going, energy things? What do you mean? As if he's feigning he has no idea what she's talking about, or literally has no idea what she's talking about. And this isn't a criticism of Joe Rogan. It's a criticism of previous authors who write about the Book of Enoch and the Watcher angels that we're speaking of in explicitly flesh and blood terms. They are not flesh and blood beings, and that's what I'm going to establish here. As Luna is speaking and referring to them as these energy things, she's actually telling me that she knows exactly what these beings are and what they're like. Luna, again, stumbling, falling back. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I said too much. She goes, well, they call them interdimensional beings. They, presuming to be the whistleblowers that are working within the U.S. government UAP apparatus, She says, I think they can operate through the time spaces that we currently have, and that is not something that I came up with on my own. It's based on stuff that we've seen. Okay? Presumably herself, Tim Burchett, others. Information we have been told, and then I think there's this historical aspect, she says. This gets into deeper theories and concepts of religion, and I think the history that we currently know. Yeah, let's go. Let's get into it here. Tell me exactly what you're speaking of here, because I have a sense of this and I want to know. I want to hear it from the insiders. She claims there is testimony to interdimensional travel. Wow. Okay. That is a profound civilization shift right there. If suddenly we're able to understand and that beings are traveling interdimensionally and how they can possibly do that. She claims she has seen evidence of spaceships and portals. As someone who has studied UFO, UAP, and Stargate and wormholes in conjunction with all of this for 30 years, this is mind-blowing, okay, to have a congressperson asserting, yeah, we have total evidence of this. She's seen it, these energy things. She claims she has seen photos of ships not made by human hands. Her words. Is there a historical connection? She asks rhetorically. Yes. Do these events go back to the time before Christ? She asks rhetorically. Yes, she answers. Have we reverse engineered parts of their technology? Yes, she answers. This is a holy fucking shit moment. This is not just a holy shit moment. This is a holy fucking shit moment. This is a congressperson using a very, very specific term here. That's a tip-off to me and someone, again, who has studied this, that she knows exactly what she's talking about. And that specific term is not made by human hands. The initial knee-jerk interpretation of that is, it's made by something other than a human being. Not so fast. This is a very specific term. And immediately after this is when Congressperson Luna opens hearings on restoring public trust through UAP transparency. Okay, here we go. This is, now we're the House Oversight Committee. We're really going to start digging into this. But I want to get back to this not made with human hands term, okay? It's unusual. It appeared in an extraordinary way in June 2019 with the leak of the notes written by Dr. Eric Davis in the aftermath of a meeting with Navy Admiral Wilson on October 16, 2002. The meeting concerned alien technology and a secret military program to study how alien craft actually work. The meeting concerned alien technology and how it works, and among numerous bombshells, Davis acknowledges the existence of this program and that it is well buried in the government and beyond the oversight of Congress. In other words, the American people and the U.S. Congress, they don't need to know any of this, but they've been working on this, obviously, for a while. Davis says in his notes that there, quote, there were a reverse engineering program, unquote, of, quote, technological hardware, unquote, recovered in the past. Yeah, these are from archaeological sites. Not crashes, these are recovered from archaeological sites. He wondered if they meant Soviet Chinese craft, and he also thought UFOs was a term used as a cover for that. But he learned that they weren't that either. They had a craft that could fly in space, air, water, dimensions, Davis wondered. More, he wrote, it was technology that was not of this earth, not made by man, not made by human hands. Davis said he had still no idea where it came from. They had ideas. That is all. This is an extraordinary link that will have wide repercussions because it verifies something that UFO researchers have known for a very long time, that the U.S. government has possession of these craft and they're covering it up. The one Davis is referring to is beyond our technological comprehension. Unlike the Roswell crash, whose hardware was more easily harvested and successfully sprinkled into corporate America, according to theorists, the craft that Davis is speaking of as not made with human hands is ethereal. It's spiritual. And let me explain why. It's because not made with human hands is thought to mean it is extraterrestrial. However, I've been studying this term for decades in the spiritual sense, which is why it totally surprised me that Davis was using this term, because in the spiritual sense, not made with human hands is applied to works of art that are projected or apported, is the term, from other realms. This means these objects manifest from elsewhere. And in my mind, in 2018 or 19, Dr. Eric Davis is saying, we're dealing with craft that don't come from this layer of reality. They're projections from a higher layer of reality. They're not made with human hands. The Greek word that means not made with human hands is archaeopoitos, or archaeopoita for plural. It refers to icons, relics, or structures believed to have been created miraculously through divine intervention or by non-human hands, not made with human hands. The penultimate example, of course, is the Shroud of Turin. And when we think about this, we're talking about watcher angels who are performing these miraculous things in the Book of Enoch, and they possess a craft that we're being told is not made with human hands. That is, if we equate the craft that Davis is speaking of with something that the Watchers were using. The Watchers very clearly did three forbidden things. They crossed realms, layers of reality, layers of the simulation. They shared knowledge. They altered humanity. They taught metallurgy, astronomy, medicine, language. They gave us cosmetics to the women. And most dangerously, they taught us how to see and how to perceive our reality. In other words, they upgraded human perception. And for some reason, the authors of the Book of Enoch decided, oh, this was a terrible thing. These watcher angels crossed over a forbidden realm. They taught us metallurgy, alchemy, in other words, astronomy, medicine, herbology, language, and even gave us cosmetics to make us prettier. We can't have that. So what happens is they start to demonize those watchers. In Enoch, the crime is not violence. The crime of the watchers, these fallen angels, as we'll see what they are, is premature awakening. They're accelerating human evolution. These beings are called fallen, not because they're evil, as many assert, but because they descended from a higher frequency realm, a higher layer of reality. They fell into physical flesh and blood bodies. They broke the quarantine between worlds. They crossed over a perceived forbidden boundary. Nobody comes down, nobody goes up. That is the quote-unquote cosmic law. And what did the Watcher angels' actions produce? Not monsters, hybrids. Sound familiar? Because this is the same language we now use when we speak of non-human intelligence. Interdimensional, non-local, trans-medium, neither fully physical nor fully material. The ancients weren't primitive. They were poetic engineers of consciousness telling exactly what's going on in our present time. So let's look at some of the artwork here that portrays the descent of these beings, these fallen angels, the watchers, as told in Enoch. In Enoch, we learned that these watcher angels inhabited the throne of God. And what you see characterized in artwork is the descent of these beings. At the very top, you see God enthroned in the center, surrounded by his throne, and you see various angelic figures leaving their thrones and crossing over a forbidden barrier, which is indicated by a line of clouds 3/4 of the way up in the painting or a quarter of the way down, that is guarded by God's militia, the angels who patrol these boundaries between worlds. And these watcher angels just found a way to evade the militia, crossed over the boundary, having evacuated their thrones at God's throne, and descended into the earth and took on physical flesh and blood bodies. Here's another interpretation. And this, again, is why they're called fallen. It has nothing to do with a moral interpretation that fallen equals evil. That is not fully established. In a second version of this painting, The Fall of the Rebel Angels, by an anonymous 14th century Sienese painter, we see Christ up above hovering in his fiery angel craft. Okay? We see several angels have abandoned their stations at the throne of God and have crossed a band of stars. They've crossed a band of stars, once again guarded by angel or God's militia. This unfolded ribbon could symbolize, at least in my mind, a band of reality or a region of space-time. The Bible says that space can be rolled up. Space can be traversed. Space can be even consumed. Space can be worn like a cloak or a garment. And here they're clearly showing that these angels exist in another reality beyond the band of stars, which I interpreted as our layer of reality. And again, this band of stars is what is forbidden to cross, and humans are warned to avoid this band of stars and attempting this crossing, as our flesh and blood bodies are unable to do so. The only way that we can traverse these interdimensional realms is to become like the Watcher angels, who, as we have established, are energetic beings of light. So here in the detail, we see Christ on his fiery throne, his craft, right? What is this? This is like coming practically out of our contemporary imagination. We see the band of stars, the ribbon of space-time. We see the throne. We see the fiery craft. And again, with the detail, the descent of the angels as they're taking on physicality. In the Renaissance mind, they interpreted this. They interpreted this descent as a descent from a higher state into a lower state, and they began portraying these beings as demons. And this is what has sunk into even the contemporary mentality around these beings, is that the fallen angels who interacted with Enoch and others are demonic. And that may or may not be true. We'll save that argument for another presentation. I'm simply establishing here that in the Renaissance mind, this is how they portrayed the transformation of these beings from their higher frequency bodies when they're existing at the throne of God to their lower frequency earthly flesh and blood bodies, and they were considered to be demons as a result. I just wanted to point out to you Andrea Bartolo's painting of the Virgin Mary with the Christ child, and up above you see Christ in a similar craft to what we saw in that prior Sienese painting. It's the way Christ was portrayed, as if to suggest in our vernacular that he is utilizing some sort of a craft in order to traverse the dimensions. And craft could be something that is like a space craft, or craft could refer to something in the way the Masons refer to it. The craft is the act of perfecting an impure being into a pure being, or taking the stone ashlar and perfecting it. That is the craft. And so when Christ is in a craft, it suggests that he has completed or perfected the craft and now is able to traverse the dimensions. Going forward, later into the Renaissance and beyond, we come into the Vatican, where we see these incredible depictions of the fall of these angels. And of course, you have other angels that are battling with them, and they are, of course, portrayed as these sort of reptilian kind of beings. And this is how this comes into play here. There are some descriptions in the Dead Sea Scrolls and elsewhere that describe these angels as having the visage of a serpent, but nowhere else that I'm aware of are they described as reptilian beings. This is coming out of the imagination of these Renaissance painters. They're demons, they must look like snakes, right? That's the equation. But that may or may not be so. Here's the fall of the rebel angels in a slightly earlier version from 1230. This is, again, portraying the beginning of evil. The Book of Enoch and other texts say that when these angels fell, this is when evil enters into our world. And they are coming through what's referred to as the beast-headed hell mouth. And all of the associations henceforth have this connection that these beings are somehow demonic, that they have these dark brown bodies and their faces become bestial with long ears, great bulging eyes, and grimacing jaws. This is all coming out of Tibetan art, by the way. The Tibetans describe something very similar. And it may or may be true, may or not be true, that that is how these beings actually appear, but it is most certainly true that this is how the Renaissance artists and others began to depict these fallen angels. Another example where we see God up above on his throne. The angels are battling these nasty fallen angels that decided to leave the heavenly throne and take on physical flesh and blood bodies. And of course, they're portrayed as these kind of reptilian / evil looking beings. But what if the watcher angels described in Enoch didn't become demons? What if instead they were demonized by a church or demonized by writers who somehow took issue with advanced celestial beings coming to Earth, accelerating human evolution by teaching us metallurgy, herbology, astronomy, and giving our women cosmetics so that they can augment their body? What if that is what actually happened, is they're not demons and they are demonized? Here is, to me, one of the most important bits of research I have presented in any of my books. It's the pill in the hamburger, okay? So follow me with this because it's tremendously important and very important for us to understand in light of what is now being conversed in or talked about in our Congress. So these fallen angels are called the Watchers. And in the New Testament, the book of Jude, we're told that the Watchers are the angels which kept not their first estate, but which left their original habitation, which was the throne of God, beyond the ribbon of space-time, beyond reality as we know it. But now, those fallen angels are bound by everlasting chains of darkness awaiting the great day of judgment. This is the end time scenario, that these beings will ultimately be freed. The Greek word translated here as first estate is okiterion, which according to Strong's Bible Dictionary speaks to a dwelling place or a habitation of the body as a dwelling place for the spirit or soul. It's the abode of the soul. So what they're saying is that these watcher angels left behind their original habitation and their original state of being when they crossed over that boundary and took on physical flesh and blood bodies. This term, okiterion, is used in only one other place in the entire Bible, in 2 Corinthians 5:2, to refer to the resurrection body or eternal spiritual light body of Christ. Wait a minute. This is exactly what Jesus attained in his resurrection, which is evidenced by the Shroud of Turin, which is a relic not made by human hands. It's a miraculous thing, in other words. It's coming from another realm in the vernacular of modern day UAP studies vis-a-vis Dr. Eric Davis. So what this is saying is that when Jesus is visited in the tomb, for example, by an angel of the Lord whose body was like plasma, that this must be one of the watcher angels that we're told are evil because they crossed this forbidden boundary. Well, you can't have it both ways, in my view. How can you have beings traversing this forbidden boundary, the angels of the Lord, and on one instance, you're saying that they're demonic and demons because they gave our women cosmetics and gave us all herbology and astronomy and alchemy, and yet here's Christ attaining exactly the same state of being that these watcher angels enjoyed before they fell. I thought resurrection was something that only morally superior, righteous, pure, and perfect beings were able to attain. But that's not what Enoch is saying. Enoch is saying that is the ordinary state of being of the angels at God's throne, and a handful of them decided, I want to come down to earth and teach humanity, and yeah, I'd really love to have sex with earth girls too, because that's what happened. They married, they saw the daughters of men and saw that they were fair, and they created hybrid offspring, the Nephilim, the giants, right? So something is off here, in my opinion, that when we're talking about these angels, they obviously have attained the highest ability of spirituality on this planet, resurrection, that Jesus demonstrated, unless resurrection is no big deal after all. I'm not willing to consider that, but that's essentially what this can be saying. Or it's that, or that, wait a minute, these angels are something different than we are understanding. In my work, going back to 2006, I have compared and united the traditional Christian images of Christ in his Okite body, his light body, his resurrection body, his rainbow body, his glory body. These are terms that are used for this state of being, with what the Tibetans say is possible for all of us. That in fact our human body was designed to have its frequency elevated until we dissolve it into 5-colored rainbow light, and then can project ourselves into other worlds, other realms. The Tibetans teach that this is taught in 13 star systems, including our own, with beings coming and going through these star systems, and that once a person projects their consciousness to world B, they can then phase back into physicality if they choose to do so. It's exactly what Jesus did. He descended from a higher layer, manifested a physical flesh and blood body, dissolved it into its original divine energetic essence, portrayed as a rainbow color light body in Christian art, and then ascended to another realm, but then came back over, 11, 12 times to the disciples in the New Testament. He ate honeycomb with them. He brought teachings with them. In the Gnostic text, he gave them navigation clues for how to navigate the afterlife realm. What is going on here? I think what we're feeling around here is the ultimate teaching of these watcher angels, that beyond metallurgy, alchemy, beyond herbology, beyond cosmetics, they probably were the ones that originally taught us, hey, you're not bound to this planet. You can activate the latent capabilities of your body, phase into a light body, and star walk, right? And the teaching is, from the Tibetans anyway, is that beyond our material and emotional body, we have a body of light. Deep inside you, there is a pure being, a pure light being, pure energy. One of these energy things again, existing in total potentiality. It has manifested your physical body. It is exactly the same state of being that Michael, after he anointed Enoch with this oil, he dissolved his body into glorious light, so he was exactly the same as the angels. There was no difference, said Enoch. I'm suggesting to you that this is an example of Enoch receiving the oil that enabled him to attain his rainbow light body, which is the ordinary state of being of the angels at the next level of our perceivable reality. Now, Corinthians, Paul speaks directly to this, saying that because humans are made in the perfect image of God, we are fractals of our Creator, we have the spiritual capacity to participate in or mirror Jesus' divine glory as image bearers and reactivate our own light body. The Bible is very specific about this, saying, as was the man of dust, meaning carbon or DNA, so also are those who are of the dust. And as is the man of heaven, from the next layer, so also are those who are of heaven. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, our earthly flesh and blood carbon body, we shall also bear the image of the man of heaven. Okay, that's the Christian promise. That is what Christianity is all about. That in fact, when Christ returns, we will be like him. We will mirror him in this capacity. And all of a sudden, we've got all this talk about Enoch, who already achieved this thousands of years before Christ, if he existed in the pre-flood world, as Enoch proclaims. And then Jesus comes along as another exemplar. Here, let me show you how you do this. You all can do this. It's well within the realm of your possibility. You might want to find the oil that I've left behind. There's most certainly the lost dose of the Son of Man that will be helpful. But to begin, you've got to have a conception of who you really are. This is not who we are. This is a part of us. Our flesh and blood body is not our true body. It is only an image of the true. The true is exactly what we're looking at here. The Okite body, the resurrection body, the light body, This is what we're all shooting for, and this is what the Watcher angels possessed in the Book of Enoch. And again, I'm suggesting that this is exactly the same as what we see in the Tibetan Rainbow Light Body tradition. The body of the perfect, as the Gospel of Luke says, is to become transmaterial or semi-angelic, fulfilling the teaching of the Gospel of Luke. And now, the Rainbow Light Body in Tibet is referred to as the Great Perfection. So here's our important tie-in here. Luke goes on to say that neither can they die anymore, for they are equal unto the angels and are the children of God, being the children of the resurrection. And because of this, they have now attained their angelic status. They have reversed what has happened with the fall and now have the ability to ascend like Enoch did. They can attain a glorified body or a body of shining rainbow light. That is the form that early Christianity, original Christianity, believed not only Christ possessed after his resurrection, but also saved, meaning whole and holy humans, will one day also share this form. 2 Corinthians 3:18, Paul remarks that Christians are in fact in the process of transfiguring into heavenly light beings. This would normally launch me into a 3-hour presentation about the parallels between this teaching and transhumanism, but we'll save that for another presentation. I'm simply here to say that when Representative Ana Paulina Luna is telling us that these are non-human intelligences referred to in the Book of Enoch, this is what we're talking about. This is the technology that these beings possessed. Now, in the few minutes I have left here, I want to go back to 2008 to my presentation Morph, The Secret of Light Body Activation, because I left some seeds in that presentation that have now blossomed into almost a full-blown tree by now in 2026. So let's follow this just for a few minutes. It's going to fill in some backstory, and it's going to give us some powerful insight into what Congress, I think, potentially has been looking at in the skiff, and what Representative Luna and others are saying they have actually seen in terms of the craft of these angelic beings. So it begins with the ascension of Jesus. In the book of Acts, we are told that there was a gathering of men in white, of disciples. They watched as Jesus was taken up, and a cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. That's a tip-off that you're dealing with the angels of the Lord, these beings that can traverse the dimensions. Men of Galilee, these angels of the Lord said, why do you stand here looking into the sky? The same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. So they're telling us that this is a two-way channel of communication here. And what I'm showing you here is, in my view, according to my research, the earliest depiction of that ascension. It's 4th century. It's in Egypt. It's presently in the Coptic Museum in Cairo. And what we see is Christ enthroned, his feet on a footstool. That's the Ark of the Covenant, which served as God's footstool. He's surrounded by a cloud. A cloud? That doesn't look like a cloud. That looks like concentric rings. That looks to me like a portal or a gateway. This is a face-on view of a vertical ascent that he's making. So we have to actually envision him in this cloud that is sort of like a tube of light. We have these counter-rotating fields around him that are forming an X, indicating he is the X-man. This is a convergent point. We see 4 wheels at the base of that throne. Those are very important in terms of our conversation about these craft. We're going to have to save that for later. It's a tease, but it requires lengthy and really thoughtful interpretation, so I'm going to save that. But I'm also right now going to call your attention to the book he's got in his hand and the cross that he wears on his chest. I am the light is the term that Christ would use for himself. And it's very curious that the symbol on his chest precisely matches the first photo of a photon, a particle of light. That's a really profound coincidence. Or is it, right? So when we look into this here, we're talking about a man of light who descended into physical flesh and blood form, just like the watcher angels in Enoch. And when he ascends, he has a throne. And that throne is partly composed of the Ark of the Covenant. There are other components I will discuss later, but the point is that here he is ascending on that throne in the cloud. And when we look at that, the transition that he's making here, it precisely maps onto what we'd expect if he was traveling through a wormhole. We have the transition point at the outer end. We have the vortex. We have the throat of the wormhole that he has opened, that he will travel through to the kingdom of heaven. Over and over again in early Christian art, this is Kora Church in Istanbul, Turkey, we see the ascension of Christ in the cloud that to our modern sensibility and perception doesn't look like a cloud. It looks like a portal or a gateway or some sort of bubble of light that Christ is ascending upon, that he has manifested from within his body. And this continues on up into the Renaissance. Later, the throne, the Ark of the Covenant throne, vanishes from the art, and they just simply show him on a transparent ark. But we're to know, fill in the blank, that what they've done is just eliminated the technology, but they're still showing us the symbolism. Here he is in the cloud, filled with stars, the concentric rings indicating he's going into an inner world, into a vortex. Same thing that we see here, the transparent ark. We see the angels lifting the cloud into the sky. What if it's not a cloud? What if this is the multidimensional craft that is being spoken of in non-human intelligence circles, indeed within the US Congress? What if that's what we're dealing with here? That is the seed that I planted back in 2008. Here is a 16th century Russian depiction of the Second Coming, where Christ is riding upon his cloud, composed of the concentric rings, that is being held aloft or held open by, on the left-hand side, you've got the Mother Mary, on the right-hand side, John the Baptist, and just beneath the cloud, again tended by Mary and John the Baptist, is this object. You see the transparent wheels, the ophanum as they're called, also on this cloud. There's a relationship between this cloud and between this device, this sign, the seal, this tool or instrument that this cloud is somehow, what I would say, tethered to. What is that? It's got a feathered throne. There's a book. There's a robe. There's a cross that's attached to it. What is that? That's the question I asked myself back in 2010. I was shocked to find the answer that what we're actually looking at in this artwork is the prepared throne of Christ. This is his property. It's his thing. It's his device. And it's somehow utilized in his ascension with this upon this cloud. And what I noticed is that the components of this Adamastia throne, the ark throne, the cross, the book, are exactly the same as the components of the original Ark of the Covenant. Not the decoy. The decoy Ark of the Covenant is just the golden box that might contain the tablets. The real one contains the rod of Aaron, whose name means enlightenment, the flask of manna, the hallucinogenic star food, the cruse of anointing oil. Exactly the same oil that the Archangel Michael anointed Enoch with that dissolved his body into a Christ-like status. And there's the book. The robe isn't here, but we're to fill in the blank that what we're actually looking at here, and this was the conclusion in my book, 2012 book, The Judgment Day Device, is that the fully assembled, real, original Ark of the Covenant and the Adamastia throne of Christ, some device that's involved with his coming and going, are the same thing. Okay? Here's another representation of the Ark with its components. You almost never see all these components together. I've got maybe 2 or 3 images of this nature. But when you assemble those, you get the Adamastia throne of Christ, his ascension instrument, and also his tool of descension as well. They are the same thing. And so back in 2008, I'm looking at this bubble imagery, and I'm learning about how in 1994, Miguel Alcubierre, a Mexican physicist, realized that for spacecraft to travel faster than the speed of light, it would need to somehow create a warp bubble, as he described it, a magic bubble And this would allow the space-time to be contained within its own region of space-time. And if the bubble can be controlled, then the light speed limit can be exceeded in normal space because the spacecraft would be stationary, whereas the bubble in space-time will zip around at effectively infinite speed. Okay? And again, this is 1994 when Alcubierre is putting this together, and it's 2008 where I'm looking at this imagery going, we got a bubble, a magic bubble, and a craft inside that bubble, and they're proposing that this is how we could traverse space-time at light speed. And I come back to my Ascension art, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. Christ is in a magic bubble here. He is traversing the layers of reality, and now we have a physics explanation for what is actually transpiring here. He's surrounded by this magic bubble. Now, fast forward to 2017. The New York Times produces a major link where they release videos taken by U.S. Navy pilots off the coast of California and off the coast of Florida, and these craft that are doing these impossible things. And listen to the reaction of the pilots taking this video. This is... They are tracking craft that are doing impossible things. Transmedium, going in and out of the water, traveling impossible distances, dropping from 80,000 feet to the surface of the ocean in seconds. My friend, Dr. Travis Taylor, colleague on Ancient Aliens, was at this time, or shortly after, pardon me, the chief scientist of the U.S. government's UAP program. He is the one who analyzed this video footage. And here's what Dr. Travis Taylor said about these videos and these craft. The Go Fast video and Tic Tac show a halo around these craft that is very, very cold inside the sphere that is around the craft while the craft is hotter. The ambient cloud layer around it is much warmer, and for some reason there seems to be this bubble around the vehicle that looks like a vacuum, or at least much colder than the normal atmosphere in that region. Why that is, he says, he can't explain it, but if you look at exotic solutions like warp bubbles, wormholes, general relativistic anti-gravity type concepts, all these things require some kind of magic bubble space-time manipulation around it, and this could be a telltale sign of what we're seeing in these videos. There's also the question of whether living beings are physically piloting these UFO or whether UAP are potentially pilotless drones. The point I'm getting at here is that the fact that these craft are observed winking in and out of our reality gives an indication that what we might be seeing is a three-dimensional projection of a fifth-dimensional object. It's not a hologram. These craft are not made out of matter, but they're a projection for our three-dimensional space. They're poking into our universe. We can bounce radar off them. We can see them in infrared. We can photograph them. However, they may not actually be there in the sense that we could crash into them. We may be looking at craft emerging from a wormhole. And so if these Tic Tac craft is a projection, the question is, from where are they coming? And what exactly is the correspondence between what these Navy craft are displaying? And here's a photo, by the way, of myself with Dr. Taylor, Nick Pope, Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Childress. We're on the road with Ancient Aliens Live. But what I'm asking, when I ask Travis about often during our road trips on Ancient Aliens Live, driving 300 miles, what else are we going to talk about? UFOs, wormholes, Christ, so forth. What I'm proposing here is that the cloud, the magic bubble that Alcubierre proposed, and the Tic Tac craft all display exactly the same capabilities. And this is what Representative Luna and other representatives of Congress have been shown. And this is why they are connecting it with Enoch, because this is exactly the same transformation or transfiguration that Enoch was known to have undergone vis-a-vis the Archangel Michael. So with these thoughts in mind, we're going to turn now to our conversation with Dr. Travis Taylor, the former chief scientist of the UAP task force of the U.S. government, and the person that I consider not only a friend, but the person that I believe knows more about UAP and these subjects than any other person on the planet. So let's have a look at my conversation with Dr. Travis Taylor. Thank you very much.